Hi, my name is Sis with DBG. This video is part of a series of videos where we demonstrate the concept of NextGen BI. While DBG works with a wide array of clients from many different industries, we chose to use the land registry data as it's generic and well understood enough for any viewers of this video to appreciate NextGen BI. So let's get started. In a nutshell, NextGen BI allows non-technical users to see, converse, interact with, and ultimately understand data. Let's have a look at some data. As mentioned before, we've chosen the land registry data for this demo. Just going to hop into Google and do a quick search for Gov Data UK. And that gives me a quick list of results here. And the thing I'm looking for is obviously a data set. So going into datasets, I'm presented with 26,000 possible datasets from data.gov.uk, and the one I'm interested in is the Land Registry Price Paid. So by running a quick search, I'm returned with 26 results, and the one I want is the one at the very top. So we can just pause there for a minute. A renowned professor by the name of William Edwards Deming once said, "In God we trust, all others must bring data." I find it absolutely fascinating that there's a website called data.gov.uk and it has over 26,000 datasets publicly accessible. There's quite a bit of information on this site, and as you can see, we have a number of different formats in which that data can be provided. We've got CSV files, text files, HTML, API, but ultimately the data is available in whichever way you would wish to connect to or the way that you understand the connection to work. Something that stood out for me here is the size of the data. So to get some good meaning from data, having a nice sizable volume of data would really help in terms of understanding trends over time for year-on-year comparisons. For depending on the data set, you might look at 10 years worth of data. What we see here is that we have data going back all the way to 1995. We also see that there's 24 million definitive records in here, and the actual size of the complete file is around 2.8 gigabytes in size. That presents a whole host of different challenges and actually eliminates a bunch of tools that perhaps from a business user perspective would be your default solutions for analyzing data. So Excel has, I think, around 1 million in terms of limitation of data that you can push through. That used to be 65,000 in later versions of Excel. It's grown quite bigger. I think with Microsoft Access, the single database in Microsoft Access database is around 2 gig, and this is 2.8. So it's a lot of data. There's a lot of probably wealthy information in there. We haven't actually looked at what's contained in those files yet, but that first introduction has already given us an idea of the size of data, how far back it goes, and the number of records that are stored in there, which of course is indicative of size. Clicking on the About page here, which is about the price paid data, takes us to another page that reveals a lot more information about the data held within that data set. One of the things that was particularly useful for me was this explanations document where they cover the headings of each of the fields along with the descriptors and a way for you to understand what the different values mean. This is what we would call in BI or in technical terms metadata. It's data about data. The page goes further to describe what data is excluded from the price paid data, which is absolutely useful. Almost serves as a caveat for a business user or even personal public user using this information to try and drive some form of decision. An example might be looking at what people paid for houses in the same street over time, and then making a decision on how much you're willing to pay towards a house, for example. Obviously, I'm simplifying things, but it's good to understand what caveats are carried with the data. So it's great that they've documented that piece of information here as well. And if you're to build an asset to then publicize the work through a NextGen BI tool, it would be useful to serve those caveats within that environment as well. And we'll talk about that a little later on. So there's a whole bunch of interesting information on this page, definitely worth a read. But in the interest of time, we'll stop there as far as the about the data page is concerned. Going back to the main page for the Land Registry Paid price data, I can scroll down and look for the data set that I'd like to use. Over here, I'm going to choose a CSV file, which is the full data set from 1995 up to 2015. Before I download the data, I'd like to preview it and just get an understanding of what I'm about to download. So obviously it's a fairly large file as previously mentioned, but when you look at the data you can also see a sample of the information. The first time I saw this, I thought the first column was a header column, mainly because of the bold font. However, it's just another row of data in there. So for example, I can work out visually that that's the postcode. I can have a guess at the other values based on the subsequent values. However, that About Us page also describes what the individual headers are. So that metadata that we saw earlier on is absolutely crucial. Without it, you wouldn't be able to use this data in a very confident way. I would have naturally expected the header to be included within the file, but it obviously isn't, and we're going to need to deal with that along with a whole host of other data related challenges to get the data prepared to go on stage. But we'll deal with that later on. Now, going back to the motivation of this particular video is to give an introductory view into a journey that takes us from this headerless, raw, high volume data into data that is more interactive, easy to understand, and a lot more intuitive than what we were seeing before. So with this data, I'm able to click on the information, zoom into details of interest, see the crash of 2008 of the housing market and this recovery in 2014 that started maybe in 2013. I'm able to look at areas of interest to zoom into particular spots that might be of interest to me. Again, expand that view, able to lasso through to the southwest around where we live, and really start looking at the data that's there in a lot more detail. And the story continues into other tabs where we can focus on particular areas of interest, all the way through to the segmentation of the people or the nature of the people that live in those areas, and just really navigate that data around in lots of very interesting ways that is not possible when you're looking at this raw data. Out of this 14 columns of data comes an entire story that is pretty much impossible to see in any of the what we'd call traditional tools in the way that you can with NextGen BI. And it's really to explain how that journey takes us from this data to the dashboard that you just saw a second ago. And we'll cover, as I say, all that in more detail in subsequent videos, but this is just an introductory video. So do stay tuned. Look out for the part 2 series of this land registry data program, and we hopefully it does give you some insight into NextGen BI. Many thanks for your time. Cheers.